Hello, friends. If this joke tickled your funny bone, don't forget to hit subscribe. It's an easy way to keep the humor flowing into your feed. Don't miss the last one. That is special joke for you.
A man goes to see the rabbi. Rabbi, something terrible is happening and I have to talk to you about it. The rabbi asked, "What's wrong?" The man replied, "My wife is poisoning me." The rabbi, very surprised by this, asks, "How can that be?" The man then pleads, "I'm telling you, I'm certain she's poisoning me. What should I do?" The rabbi then offers, "Tell you what, let me talk to her. I'll see what I can find out, and I'll let you know." A week later, the rabbi calls the man and says, "Well, I spoke to your wife. I spoke to her on the phone for 3 hours. You want my advice?" The man said yes, and the rabbi replied, "Take the poison." 3 mischievous old grandmas were sitting on a bench outside the nursing home when an old grandpa walked by. One of the old grandmas yelled out, "Hey, we bet we can tell exactly how old you are." The old man said, "There is no way you can guess my age." One of the grandmas said, "Sure we can. Just drop your pants and we can tell your exact age." Embarrassed, but anxious to prove they couldn't do it, he dropped his drawers. The grandmas asked him to first turn around a couple of times and then jump up and down several times. Determined to prove them wrong, he did it. Then they all said in unison, "You're 87 years old!" Standing with his pants down around his ankles, the old gentleman asked, "How in the world did you guess my age?" Slapping their knees, high-fiving and grinning from ear to ear, the 3 old ladies happily crowed. "We were at your birthday party yesterday. Grandpa and Grandma were watching the television evangelical show, and the preacher said, 'If the viewers at home wanted to be healed, place one hand on the television set and the other hand on the body part where they want it to be healed.' Grandma got up and slowly hobbled to the television set, placing her right hand on the set and her left hand on her arthritic shoulder that was causing her to have great pain. Then Grandpa got up, went to the TV, and placed his right hand on the set and his left hand on his crotch. Grandma scowled at him and said, I guess you just don't get it. The purpose of doing this is to heal the sick, not to raise the dead." A distinguished young woman on a flight from Switzerland asked the priest seated beside her, "Father, may I ask a favor?" "Of course. What may I do for you?" "Well, I bought an expensive electronic hairdryer that is well over the customs limits, and I'm afraid they'll confiscate it. Is there any way you could carry it through customs for me? Under your robes, perhaps?" "I would love to help you, dear, but I must warn you, I will not lie with your honest face. Father, no one will question you." When they got to customs, she let the priest go ahead of her. The official asked, "Father, do you have anything to declare?" "From the top of my head down to my waist, I have nothing to declare." The official thought this answer strange, so asked, "And what do you have to declare from your waist to the floor?" "I have a marvelous little instrument designed to be used on a woman, but which is, to date, unused." Roaring with laughter, the official said, "Go ahead, Father, next!" A firefighter is working on the engine outside the station when he notices a little boy next door in a little red wagon with tiny ladders hung off the side and a garden hose tightly coiled in the middle. The boy is wearing a firefighter's helmet and has the wagon tied to a dog and a cat. The fighter walks over to take a closer look. "That sure is a nice fire truck," the firefighter says with admiration. "Thanks," says the little boy. As the firefighter looks a little closer, he notices the boy has tied the wagon to the dog's collar and to the cat's testicles. "Little partner," the firefighter says, "I don't want to tell you how to run your fire truck, but if you were to tie that rope around the cat's collar, I think you could go faster." The little boy says, "You're probably right, but then I wouldn't have a siren." A retired gentleman went into the Social Security office to apply for Social Security. After waiting in line for a long time, he got to the counter. The woman behind the counter asked him for his driver's license to verify his age. He looked in his pockets and realized he had left his wallet at home. He told the woman that he was very sorry, but he seemed to have left his wallet at home. "Will I have to go home and come back now?" he asked. The woman said, "Unbutton your shirt?" So he opened his shirt, revealing lots of silvery, curly hair. She said, "That silver hair on your chest is proof enough for me," and she processed his Social Security application. When he got home, the man excitedly told his wife about his experience at the Social Security office. She sniffed at him. "You should have dropped your pants. You might have qualified for disability, too." A priest walked into a barber shop in Washington, D.C. After he got his hair cut, he asked how much it would be. The barber said, "No charge. I consider it a service to the Lord." The next morning, the barber came to work, and there were 12 prayer books and a thank you note from the priest in front of the door. Later that day, a police officer came in and got his hair cut. He then asked how much it was. The barber said, "No charge. I consider it a service to the community." The next morning he came to work, and there were a dozen donuts and a thank you note from the police officer. Then a senator came in and got a haircut. When he was done, he asked how much it was. The barber said, "No charge. I consider it a service to the country." The next morning, the barber came to work, and there were 12 senators in front of the door. An Arizona couple, both well into their 80s, went to a relations therapist's office. The doctor asked, "What can I do for you?" The man said, "Will you watch us have intercourse?" The doctor raised both eyebrows, but he was so amazed that such an elderly couple was asking for advice that he agreed. When the couple finished, the doctor said, "There's absolutely nothing wrong with the way you have intercourse." He thanked them for coming, wished them good luck, charged them $50, and said goodbye. The next week, the same couple returned and asked the therapist to watch again. The therapist was a bit puzzled, but agreed. This happened several weeks in a row. The couple would make an appointment, have intercourse with no problems, pay the doctor, then leave. Finally, after 3 months of this routine, the doctor said, "I'm sorry, but I have to ask, just what are you trying to find out?" The man said, "We're not trying to find out anything. She's married, so we can't go to her house. I'm married, and we can't go to my house. The Holiday Inn charges $98. The Hilton charges $139. We do it here for $50, and best of all, Medicare pays $43 of it." A man with a nagging secret couldn't keep it any longer. In the confessional, he admitted that for years he had been stealing building supplies from the lumber yard where he worked. "What did you take?" his priest asked. "Enough to build my own house, and enough for my son's house, and houses for our 2 daughters and our cottage at the lake." "This is very serious," the priest said. "I shall have to think of a far-reaching penance. Have you ever done a retreat?" "No, Father, I haven't," replied. "But if you can get the plans, I can get the lumber." There was a man who couldn't stand his wife's cat, so one day he decided to get rid of him by dumping him a long way away from the house. He put the cat in the car and drove about 20 blocks away. Then he left him at the park. But when he got home, the cat was there as if nothing had happened. The next day he decided to take the cat somewhere further away, about 50 blocks. He put him out of the car and drove home, and again the cat was there waiting for him. "This is impossible," said the man to himself. "Tomorrow I'll make sure he can't come back." The next day he puts the cat in the car and he drives around taking turn after turn. Right, left, right, and so on. Eventually, after about an hour of driving, he finally lets the cat out and drives home. A few hours later, the phone rings at his house, and his wife answers it. It's the husband, and he asks, "Is the cat there?" "Why, yes," says the wife. "He's been here quite a while." "Where are you?" "Put that bastard on the phone. I'm lost, and I need directions." A husband and wife were traveling by car from Key West to Boston. After almost 24 hours on the road, they felt too tired to continue, and they decided to stop for a rest. They stopped at a nice hotel and took a room, but they only planned to sleep for 4 hours and then get back on the road. When they checked out 4 hours later, the desk clerk handed them a bill for $350. The man explodes and demands to know why the charge is so high. He tells the clerk that although it's a nice hotel, the rooms certainly aren't worth $350. When the clerk tells him $350 is the standard rate, the man insists on speaking to the manager. The manager appears, listens to the man, and then explains that the hotel has an Olympic-sized pool and a huge conference center that are available for the husband and wife to use. But we didn't use them, the man complains. Well, they are here, and you could have, explains the manager. He goes on to explain they could have taken in one of the shows for which the hotel is famous. The best entertainers from New York, Hollywood, and Las Vegas perform here, the manager says. But we didn't go to any of those shows, complains the man again. Well, we have them, and you could have, the manager replies. No matter what facility the manager mentions, the man replies, but we didn't use it. The manager is unmoved, and eventually the man gives up and agrees to pay. He writes a check and gives it to the manager. The manager is surprised when he looks at the check. But, sir, he says, this check is only made out for $100. That right, says the man. I charged you $250 for sleeping with my wife. But I didn't, exclaims the manager. Well, the man replies, she was here and you could have. An elderly couple, Margaret and Bert, moved to Wyoming. Bert always wanted a pair of authentic cowboy boots, so seeing some on sale, he bought them and wore them home. Walking proudly, he sauntered into the kitchen and said to his wife, "Notice anything different about me?" Margaret looked him over. "Nope." Frustrated, Bert stormed off into the bathroom undressed and walked back into the kitchen completely naked except for the boots. Again, he asked Margaret, a little louder this time, "Notice anything different now?" Margaret looked up and said in her best deadpan, "Bert, what difference? It was hanging down today, it was hanging down yesterday. It will be hanging down tomorrow." Furious, Bert yelled, "And do you know why it's hanging down, Margaret?" "Nope, not a clue," she replied. "It's hanging down because it's looking at my new boots." Without missing a beat, Margaret replied, "Shoulda bought a hat, Bert. Shoulda bought a hat." An 84-year-old man is sitting on a park bench, sobbing, when a young man walks by and asks him what's wrong. Through his tears, the old man answers, "I'm in love with a 22-year-old woman." "Well, what's wrong with that?" asks the young man. Between his sobs and sniffles, he answers, "You don't understand. Every morning before she goes to work, we make love. At lunchtime, she comes home and we make love again. And then she makes my favorite meal. In the afternoon, when she gets a break, she rushes home and gives me the best time an old man could want. And then it's supper time, and all night long, we make love." He breaks down, no longer able to speak. The young man puts his arm around him. "I don't understand. It sounds like you have the perfect relationship. Why are you sitting here on this park bench crying?" The senile old man answers, again through his tears, "I can't remember where I live." A married couple moves into a new home. After a few days, as the husband returns home from work, his wife says to him, "Honey, one of the pipes in the bathroom is leaking. Could you fix it?" "What do I look like, a plumber?" asks the husband and goes to sleep. A few days later, the wife once again turns to her husband and says, "Honey, my car doesn't start. I think it may need a new battery. Could you change it for me?" "What do I look like, a mechanic?" she asks the husband with a frown. A week goes by, and the wife once again turns to her husband and says, "Dear, the roof is leaking. Could you do something about it?" "What do I look like, a roofer?" asks the husband. "Take care of these things yourself." He then leaves home for a week on a business trip. When I come back, he says to his wife, like all these things are taken care of. He comes back a week later and is astonished to discover the roof is fixed, the car is running, and the pipes are brand new. Great. How much is that going to cost me? He snarls at his wife. Nothing at all, said the wife. The neighbor popped in, and turns out he's a handyman. He said he'd fix the whole thing if I'd just bake him a cake or sleep with him. Wow, said the husband. What kind of cake did you make him? What do I look like? Exclaims the wife. A baker. A new business was opening, and one of the owner's friends wanted to send him flowers for the occasion. They arrived at the new business site, and the owner read the card, which said, "Rest in peace." The owner was angry and called the florist to complain. After he had told the florist of the obvious mistake and how angry he was, the florist replied, "Sir, I'm really sorry for the mistake, but rather than getting angry, you should imagine this. Somewhere there is a funeral taking place today, and they have flowers with a note saying, 'Congratulations on your new location.' The other day, a gentleman went to the dentist's office to have a tooth pulled. The dentist pulls out a freezing needle to give him a shot. 'No way! No needles!' 'I hate needles,' the man said. The dentist starts to hook up the laughing gas, and the man immediately objects. 'I can't do the gas thing either. The thought of having the gas mask on is suffocating me.' The dentist then asks the gentleman if he has any objections to taking a pill. 'No objection,' the man said. 'I'm fine with pills.' The dentist then returns and says, 'Here's a Viagra tablet.' The gentleman, totally at a loss for words, said in amazement, 'Wow, I didn't know Viagra worked as a painkiller.' 'It doesn't,' said the dentist, 'but it will give you something to hold on to when I pull your tooth.' The elderly Italian man went to his parish priest and asked if the priest would hear his confession. 'Of course, my son,' said the priest. 'Well, Father, at the beginning of World War II, a beautiful woman knocked on my door and asked me to hide her from the Germans. I hid her in my attic, and they never found her.' 'That's a wonderful thing, my son, and nothing that you need to confess,' said the priest. 'It's worse, Father. I was weak. I asked her to pay for the attic with sexual favors, and she accepted,' continued the old man. 'Well, it was a very difficult time, and you took a large risk. You would have suffered terribly at the hands of the Germans had they found you hiding her. I know that God in his wisdom and mercy will balance the good and the evil and judge you kindly,' said the priest. 'Thanks, Father,' said the old man. 'That's a load off of my mind. Can I ask another question?' 'Of course, my son,' said the priest. The old man asked, 'Do I need to tell her that the war is over?' A strong young man at a construction site was bragging that he could outdo anyone in a feat of strength. He made a special case of making fun of one of the older workers. After several minutes, the older worker had enough. 'Why don't you put your money where your mouth is?' he said. 'Huh, I will bet a week wages that I can haul something in a wheelbarrow over to that building that you won't be able to wheel back.' 'You on, old man?' the braggart replied. 'Let's see you do it.' The old man reached out and grabbed the wheelbarrow by the handles. Then, nodding to the young man, he said, 'All right, dumbass, get in.' A local preacher's friend passed away, and the preacher went to offer his condolences to the grieving widow. After a while, he softly said, 'I'd like to keep something of his, something he used a lot, as a keepsake.' The widow, smiling just a little, replied, 'Pastor, at least wait until the mourning period is over.' A cowboy who just moved to Wyoming from Texas walked into a bar and ordered 3 mugs of Bud. He sat in the back of the room, drinking a sip out of each one in turn. When he finished them, he came back to the bar and ordered 3 more. The bartender approached and told the cowboy, 'A mug goes flat after I draw it. It would taste better if you bought one at a time.' The cowboy replied, 'Well, you see, I have 2 brothers. One is in Arizona, the other is in Colorado.' When we all left our home in Texas, we promised that we'd drink this way to remember the days when we drank together. So I'm drinking one beer for each of my brothers and one for myself." The bartender admitted that this was a nice custom and left it there. The cowboy became a regular in the bar and always drank the same way. He ordered 3 mugs and drank them in turn. One day he came in and only ordered 2 mugs. All the regulars took notice and fell silent. When he came back to the bar for the second round, the bartender said, "I don't want to intrude on your grief, but I wanted to offer my condolences on your loss." The cowboy looked quite puzzled for a moment, then a light dawned in his eyes, and he laughed. "Oh no, everybody, just fine," he explained. "It's just that my wife and I joined the Baptist church, and I had to quit drinking. Hasn't affected my brothers, though." A man walks into the doctor's office and says, "Doctor, my name is Mark, and I like to be castrated." "What? Are you sure about this?" "Why?" asked the doctor, amazed. "It's something I've been considering a long time, and I'd like to have it done," replies Mark. "But have you thought it through?" "Really through?" asks the concerned doctor. "It's a very serious operation, and once it's done, there's no going back. It will change your life forever." "I'm aware of that, and you're not going to change my mind. So please book me in to be castrated, or I'll simply use another doctor." "Well, okay," says the doctor, "but I'll let you know that it is against my better judgment." So Mark has his operation, and the next day he is up and walking very slowly, legs apart, down the hospital corridor with his drip stand. Heading towards him is another patient who is walking exactly the same way. "Hi there," says Mark. "It looks as if you just had the same operation as me." "Yes, it seems like it," said the patient. "As for me, I finally decided after 37 years of life that it was time for me to be circumcised." Mark stared at him in horror and screamed, "Damn it, that was the word!" 2 friends who grew old together made a deal that whoever died first would come back and inform the other how life after death was. Their biggest fear was that there was no afterlife at all. After a long life, Dan was the first to die. Benny mourned him and waited for him to come and visit. True to his word, 2 months later, as Benny was sleeping, the voice of Dan appeared in his head. "Benny? Benny? My gosh, is that you, Dan?" "Yes, I've come back like we agreed." "That's just wonderful. What's it like?" "Well, I get up in the morning, I have intercourse, I have breakfast, and then it's off to the golf course. I have intercourse again, bathe in the warm sun, and then have intercourse a couple more times. Then I have lunch, keeping healthy, lots of greens. Another romp around the golf course, then pretty much have intercourse the rest of the afternoon. After dinner, it's back to the golf course again. Then it's more intercourse until late at night. I catch some much-needed sleep, and then the next day it starts all over again." "Wow, Dan, heaven sounds amazing." "What heaven? I'm a rabbit somewhere in Arizona." Marv was in a terrible accident at work. He fell through a floor tile and ripped off both of his ears. Since he was permanently disfigured, he settled with the company for a rather large sum of money and went on his way. One day, Marv decided to invest his money in a small but growing telecom business called Plexus Communications. After weeks of negotiations, he bought the company outright. But after signing on the dotted line, he realized that he knew nothing about running such a business and quickly set out to hire someone who could do that for him. The next day, he had set up 3 interviews. The first guy was great. He knew everything he needed to and was very interesting. At the end of the interview, Marv asked him, "Do you notice anything different about me?" And the gentleman answered, "Why, yes, I couldn't help but notice you have no ears." Marv got very angry and threw him out. The second interview was with a woman, and she was even better than the first guy. He asked her the same question, "Do you notice anything different about me?" And she replied, "Well, you'll have no ears." Marv again was upset and tossed her out. The third and last interview was the best of all 3. It was with a very young man who was fresh out of college. He was smart, he was handsome, and he seemed to be a better businessman than the first two put together. Marv was anxious, but went ahead and asked the young man the same question. Do you notice anything different about me? And to his surprise, the young man answered, yes. You wear contact lenses. Marv was shocked and said, what an incredibly observant young man. How in the world did you know that? The young man fell off his chair, laughing hysterically, and replied, well, glasses would fall right off, wouldn't they? A lonely widow, aged 70, decided that it was time to get married again. She put an ad in the local paper that read, husband wanted, must be in my age group, 70s, must not beat me, mustn't he run around on me, must still be good in bed. All applicants please apply in person. On the second day, she heard the doorbell. Much to her surprise and dismay, she opened the door to see a gray-haired gentleman sitting in a wheelchair. He had no arms or legs. The old woman said, you're not really asking me to consider you, are you? Just look at you. You have no legs. The old man smiled. Therefore, I cannot run around on you. She snorted. You don't have any arms either. Again, the old man smiled. Therefore, I can never beat you. She raised an eyebrow and asked intently, are you still good in bed? The old man leaned back, beamed a big smile, and said, rang the doorbell, didn't I? A man who had spent his whole life in the desert visited a friend. He'd never seen a train or the tracks they run on. While standing in the middle of the railroad tracks, he heard a whistle but didn't know what it was. Predictably, he's hit and is thrown, ass over kettle, to the side of the tracks, with some minor internal injuries, a few broken bones, and some bruises. After weeks in the hospital recovering, he's at his friend's house attending a party. While in the kitchen, he suddenly hears the kettle whistling. He grabs a baseball bat from the nearby closet and proceeds to batter and bash the kettle into an unrecognizable lump of metal. His friend, hearing the ruckus, rushes into the kitchen, sees what has happened, and asks the desert man, why'd you ruin my good kettle? The desert man replies, man, you gotta kill these things when they're small. An American tourist went on a trip to China. While in China, he was very sexually promiscuous and did not take any precautions. A week after arriving back home, he awakened one morning to find his member covered with bright green and purple spots. Horrified, he immediately went to see his doctor. The doctor, having never seen anything like that before, ordered some tests and told the man to return in 2 days for the results. The man returned a couple of days later, and the doctor said, I've got bad news for you. You've contracted Mongolian witty. It's very rare and almost unheard of here. We know very little about it. The man looked a little relieved and said, well, give me a shot or something and fix me up, doc. The doctor answered, I'm sorry. There's no known cure other than to amputate your member. The man screamed in horror, oh no, I want a second opinion. The doctor replied, well, it's your choice. Go ahead if you want, but surgery is your only choice. The next day, the man sought out a Chinese doctor, figuring that he'd know more about the disease. The Chinese doctor examined his member and proclaimed, ah, yes, Mongolian VD, very rare disease. The guy said to the doctor, yeah, I already know that, but what can you do? My American doctor wants to operate and amputate my member. The Chinese doctor shook his head and laughed. Stupid American doctor. American doctors always want to operate, make more money that way, and then there's no need to operate. Oh, thank God, the man replied. Yes, said the Chinese doctor. You, no worry. Wait 2 weeks, it falls off by itself. They tell of a very rich and smart man who lived many years ago in a city far away. He had a big family, a wife, children, and grandchildren, and was beloved by all. He was generous to his family and friends. One day, His wife passed away, and he was left alone in his house. After the mourning period, his children came to him and said he shouldn't live all alone in the big house. "Sell your house and possessions," they said. "Give it to us, and you can live at the elder son's house and will never want for anything." The man agreed, sold all he had, and divided it between his children, moving to the son's house. At first, he needed for nothing, and his children visited him often. But slowly, the children and grandchildren stopped showing. At his elder son's house, he became resentful. He often had no food, his clothes weren't affixed properly, and he was ashamed to walk outside in them. One day the old man said to his son, "Gather everyone and the mayor. I have something to tell you." When everyone gathered, the man said, "I have told you I sold everything, but that wasn't the truth. I still have a suitcase filled with gold and jewelry. Since my day is coming fast, I want you to have it. It is locked with 2 keys. One I will give the mayor and the other my elder son. It's buried under the big tree in front of our old house, and when I am dead, you can open the suitcase and divide what is in there." Everyone was very excited to hear this, and from that day on, the man wanted for nothing again, surrounded by children and given food, clothes, and money. He lived the rest of his life in peace. After his death, his family gathered around the big tree as the men began digging, and indeed they found the big suitcase, and with great ceremony they opened it with the 2 keys. But inside all they found was the edge of a donkey's tail and an envelope. The envelope contained a letter with only 1 line. "Only an ass gives everything away too soon."
If you're still here, I'm thrilled you enjoyed the joke. Subscribing is a simple way to stay connected. Join our community and make me a happy friend.